presence of the Timaquanas. I give you Raleigh Rand.
Thank you, and thank you all so much for coming out to hear me. It's been a really fun day. A lot of comings and goings, and please make sure you get some refreshments. We like to keep our attendees liquored up. That's just for the camera.
Oh my God, I forgot we were recording.
All right.
We can edit it out.
Okay.
That never happened. No reference to alcohol at all.
I'll be reading from my short story, Roots of Bone. Some fear an impending storm, but the turbulent air swirling around her body, blowing through the cracks in her shirt, bringing the salty air from the ocean, makes her feel more alive. Angie presses the soles of her feet against the ground and pushes backward until she's on tiptoe, then lifts her feet. The bench swing heaves forward on its chains, looking up at patches of gray sky through branches and leaves. Her sister is on the phone. Sister wants to know if she plans to accept the offer to sell her property. I haven't decided yet, she says. When I bought this place, 40 years ago? Nobody cared about Ponte Vedra Beach. Jacksonville Beach was the big draw back then. It was like a carnival, with the boardwalk, Ferris wheel, and cars driving on the beach. Ponte Vedra was clean. We had good golf and tennis, and inexpensive homes, and a lot of friendly working class neighbors back then. But now all the old places are being snapped up by CEOs of large corporations. Whoever buys this house will most likely tear it down. Can't blame them for that. It's old. Probably cut down all the trees and build a house too big for the lot. Something that will tower over my next door neighbor's one-story block home. Or try to be taller than the new house across the street. Everybody wants to be bigger than everybody else. Bigger house, bigger car, bigger boobs, bigger kids. They'll tear up all the grass, lay sod, and make it blend in with the golf course to look natural. And I gotta say, there ain't nothing natural about a golf course. I told that man he'd have to take me out feet first, that I'm not selling. And I mean, where would I go? And I told him I'd give it some thought. I don't have much in common with many of my neighbors anymore. Angie is a widow going on 4 years. She has 2 grown children who live on the West Coast, both so busy with jobs and family that she rarely sees them. She tries to stay busy playing bridge at the senior center or being a volunteer reader at the elementary school. And every March, she gets in her car and drives to Arcadia for the All-Florida Championship Rodeo, where she checks into a motel, watches cowboys compete for 4 days, and eats hot dogs with a crowd of strangers. Her husband sure loved the rodeo. Keep moving, she tells herself. Her sister thinks she's lonely and that she should sell her house and move in with her. Some days she is lonely, but other days she feels surrounded by people she knows are still here. She's part of a fellowship of other souls who once possessed this land. They have this in common. It is a shared history of this dirt and location, 700 feet from the ocean. She knows that before her house was built, others were here, seeing a similar view, getting the same breezes, knocking the same sand from their feet after walking on the beach, understanding the same signs of a hurricane, and knowing to hunker down in the same way, but a different way. Okay then, love you too, she says as she clicks off her mobile. The canopy of oaks in the backyard begins to sway with the approaching storm. The branches stir the space under them like long crooked spoons, stirring the air, the insects, and her house. These trees could stand forever, she thinks, mirroring the time they've already stood. And here she is between forever. She wishes the oaks could speak. She likes to imagine the history that took place here. The old beach's archivist says there was once a Timaquan Indian village in this very hammock. The chief was supposedly the son of Chief Satchariwa of Mayport, Supposedly, the village was well documented by Harvard back in the 1930s, but nobody who lives here knows about it. He said they'd like to keep those kinds of things secret. It's so secret, it almost didn't happen. But at times, voices from the grave plead with us to remember. The little girl across the street hasn't slept in her room since she was 3. She came into her mother's room in the middle of the night crying that there were people in her room. A man and a woman with long black hair. The man was wearing feathers, and the lady was kneeling on the floor folding clothes in the corner. The girl's older brother sees things too. Ghostly falling feathers. She plants her hydrangeas in pots because she feels the ground is sacred. Planting things in this soil would be akin to turning a graveyard into a farm, like planting rows of corn between shin bones and teeth, and letting sweet potatoes curl through rib cages and mature in hollow wombs. And she knows she's not imagining that. Mary Jo's husband once dug up an old Indian on their property out on Pioneer Road. And she called the folks at Jacksonville University to take a look. The police came too. It ended up turning into a big deal. What with making sure it wasn't a homicide and that Mary Jo didn't up and murder anyone. Now Mary Jo says, whenever we find an old corpse, we just cover it back up. It's not worth the hassle. She takes off her shoes so that her bare feet connect with the earth. She imagines the souls of all who have been here, absorbed in the bark, the leaves, the arthritic branches. One day she'll join the massive leaves against the sky, part of a great cloud of witnesses. Angie thinks some of the spirits might be the children, the generations of children who played here since the beginning. An old-timer once told her he was one of those children, before there were homes. She leans back, closes her eyes, and hears the voice of a stagecoach driver. Load 'em up, heading out to the hammocks. A group of town children, giddy with excitement, jump in the coach and off they go down bumpy shell roads. Come on in, there's seats up here if you want. They spend the afternoon climbing the oaks, swinging on vines, smacking mosquitoes and hiding and seeking, before tearing off to the ocean and charge the waves. The laughter of ghost children fills her ears, fills her thoughts. The giant limb suspending her swing sways like a ship's mast while the wind pulls her back and forth. She likes to think of that limb as a great arm of God while she dangles safely beneath. The breeze picks up and a gust of wind pushes past her. She hopes they won't call for an evacuation. The leaves begin to stir faster in the backyard, sounding like sand shaking in a plastic milk jug, and her swing is pushed from side to side. Leaves swirl like a swarm of locusts. She may be a romantic, but she's no fool, and she goes inside. The wind grows stronger, and the rain falls in intervals of violence and retreat. Wet branches, leaves, and acorns pelt her roof. She falls asleep in peace. She's not afraid, cradled in the swaying hammock of oaks. In her dream, she's at the rodeo with her husband. And one of the cowboys is the Timahuan chief. He holds on tight to his bucking horse and shows the other cowboys how it's done. When she turns to her husband, he is now the chief. And when he hands her the popcorn, she understands. This is a visitation. Beneath the dirt, between the roots, water leaks into the mouth and trickles between the teeth, dripping into the skull. A life is lived and lost, and no one remembers. But the earth and roots remember, and they welcome the soul, enfolding it into itself and kissing it entirely. The sun brings Angie out of her bathrobe with her cup of coffee in hand to see what the storm changed. Palm fronds and branches cover her lawn. The sun seems brighter than it's ever been, and she can see why. There's a hole in her roof of trees. Blue is peering down. The tree with the gigantic limb was taken down by the storm in the night, along with her swing. It is resting on the ground with a mass of crooked hands and fingers and leaves pointing in all directions. She walks over to it and sees its roots are still in the ground. It's sort of pulled out like an exposed brain. It's strange to see the whole tree this low and close. It's like it just got tired of standing, decided to lie down and take a load off. She's almost jealous of the tree. She'd love to do the same, but she wished it didn't decide to rest on her swing. Maybe it will keep growing this way. She thinks she will leave it for a while and see. The ringing of Angie's phone startles her. It's the realtor calling, probably wanting to see if she can still handle hurricane action. She can. She makes up her mind to protect the chief's land a little longer. The tree reclines in her backyard, God's arm bent at the elbow, a living headstone to a vanished people. And that is the end of my short story. I like to sit down when I'm reading because I think, whoa, you know, but that story I actually wrote in 2002 for a writing workshop, and I didn't. Oh, sorry.
Keep going.
I'd modified it some, but I'm doing research. I'm doing research on my novel Ash Wednesday, based in and around Mayport area. And so one of my friends told me I needed to go and check out. It wasn't a friend, it was someone I had an introduction to, this little lighthouse, this historic lighthouse church in Mayport. So I went there, and I met this man. They invited us to stay for after. I didn't tell them I was a writer, because that sometimes wigs people out, and they don't know, oh, write about me. So we stayed for their little hot dog gathering afterwards, and there was an elderly man, and he asked us where we lived, and when my friend lied, actually, and told him Jack's Beach, and I'd already told a lie in church too, so we were lying, like, how did we get here? How did we find out about it? And I said, well, actually, we don't live in Jack's Beach. We live in very North Ponte Vedra Beach, and we just say Jack's Beach because we're closer. And he goes, what's your exact address? And when I told him I live in this hammock, I know we could have gotten caught in a big lie. So, I live in this hammock, which I was writing about, and I have always felt like there could be people under, human remains down there for some reason. It's just think that. But he said, oh, the old Indian village. And I gave him Ponte Vedra Circle, the old Indian village. I was like, Indian village? What? Get out of town. He was like, no. And he was the beach's archivist for 20 years. And he knows, he's 86, and Lord, don't get him talking, because he can talk. He can. And another woman, and he was like, yeah, Indians live there. And another woman who was there, she goes, yeah, we had Indians on our property too. She goes, oh, we had corpses all over our property. Corpses, and whenever we find one, we just cover it back up again. So that was true. A lot of the, because they did. They called JU because he thought, oh, this is interesting. And then the JU called the police, and so it turned into this whole big investigation. And that happened actually in the 70s. There's another. There's a guy, Craig Morris, who's a park ranger, and Tim Gilmore wrote about him. It was on Tim's Jack Psycho Geo site, and he has a fascinating story. He moved to a neighborhood in Fort Caroline when he was a young boy. It was a newly developed neighborhood, and he remembers walking out to the water's edge and seeing these huge piles of oyster shells, and he said they were bones sticking out of them, human bones, and he said that really affected him for the rest of his life. And his parents were like, oh, call the police, and they came out, and they said they found 150 bodies there, and they said, skeletons, and that's just what they did. They just plowed over all of that stuff. You know that the people clearing the land to create that development saw all those bones. They're probably like, oh, just a bunch of Indians, and so there they were. And so since then, they've been treated with care, and that area has since become a protected area. And I don't think That's fascinating, but he told me, the archivist, his name was Dwight Wilson, he said, you know, all back, he goes, I remember back in the 30s, well, Harvard came and did a study of it back in the 30s, and he said, you know, that whole hammock back there, before there was a road, it used to be several feet higher than it is now. It was covered in oyster shells. And he was just stacked up with oyster shells. He said, I went back there as a teenager, and I remember seeing trucks just take truckloads out, and they were probably taking them to work sites and clearing the land to create a development. But this was when it was still, Ponte Vedra was still Mineral City, I'm sure. But probably a lot of the bones, the bones, the remains of the Timucuan were removed with those, went out with those oyster shells, because, you know, they typically buried them in those piles. That was how they, but so, he said, look for a tree in your neighborhood on the corner, and it's going to be built up several feet higher from the ground, because that is growing on the old oyster shells. And it's a huge craggy tree with a palm tree growing up in the middle of it, and that's admittance. It's actually, that's where they threw their trash. And I was like, I don't know about this. You know, I've never heard anything like this before. And so I was walking, I was like, I don't even know, this is probably all made up. So I couldn't just say, that's why I put on, it was lore, if that was in any of the literature for Jacks by Jacks, because by that point I wasn't sure if this was true. And so I went over, I was looking for this tree, and finally, I see it, this huge craggy tree, pine, I mean, it was like, what? With this pine tree growing up in the middle of it. I have a picture of it if anyone's interested. And it's like on this mound. Now it's got greenery, you know, ivy or something, but several feet off the ground. And I asked my neighbor, you know, I hear that you maybe have some Indian like stuff on your property. And she said, I do. She goes, I found buckets full. She said, I've excavated every single inch of my property since I've lived here since 1985, and she brought out all these buckets full of Timucuan pottery, and I just was like, wow, like who would know? Nobody, I wouldn't know, you know, and nobody in the neighborhood since then. I'm like, guess what? I'll catch a neighbor. Guess what I learned? And so it's just been a lot of fun learning about this, but you know, it used to be that they, in 1990, it took until 1990, oh, by the way, the story about the little girl seeing the people in her room, that's true. That my neighbor across the street told me that years ago, before I learned this current information. And when I told her about the Indian village, she got goosebumps. And the falling feathers, ghostly falling feathers, like what? Like what's that all about? I kind of want to I want to know more about that, but so in 1990, it took them this long to enact the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which means that if it requires federal agencies and institutions that receive federal funding to return Native American cultural items to lineal descendants and culturally affiliated Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations. So that's all kinds of stuff, you know. And but the sad thing about the Timucuans is there's no one to return them to. Because there are no more Timucuans, they're gone. And it would be, you know, I think it's just that, so their bones are all over the place, scattered everywhere. Their stuff is scattered everywhere. And I just want to, like I told my last group, I'm not a historian and I'm not a Timucuan expert, but I just want to be a voice for them and keep them alive. And that's what my presentation here is all about.
And how much is your book?
My book is $10. This book is not about the Timucuan. It's
Eye candy.
a comedy.
Eye candy. This is it.
Yeah, this is our most handsome man that we use.
Yes.
Kind of like a Price is Right model to show off things when we need to.
Look at the book and look at him.
So does anyone have any questions?
Great, you made it easy.
No?
How has that changed you after that conference? I mean, when you explore into kind of conversation with the past, but
I just walk out of my house every day with a sense of awe. And I do. I'm like the character in the book, even though I based her on my mother. I'm like this character in the book that is like, they were here. They were here first. They were fishing and hunting and having families and doing their thing. And, it grieves me too to know that, that the Spaniards came and took away. They wiped them out, not just by their diseases. It was actually part of the agreement that the Spanish government had with those people going into St. Augustine to build it. They said one of the stipulations is you must convert the Timucuans to Catholicism so that you can use them for the labor to build St. Augustine. And so to me, that's just like a very creepy way to Christianizing people so you can use them for slaves. That's wrong. And so wrong on so many levels. And so the Timucuans, they were a fierce and free people, and that, I'm sure that broke their spirits. I'm sure it wasn't just disease, but there is not a single living Timucuan today. The very last one that was born in the United States, born in St. Augustine, was actually, for whatever lame-brain reason, which I probably could find out, shipped over to Cuba. So he didn't even get to die in his own dirt. So that's sad. So anyway, I don't know. It happens. People live and they die, and if you don't remember them, if no one talks about them, if no one creates a memory for them, it's almost as if they never were. And I just want to commemorate them.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Did I go over time? Did I talk too much?
No.
Probably. Okay.